As 2024 winds to a close, it's been a huge year for adult fans of Lego,
This isn't a toy.
filled with massive sets to make your hearts grow and your wallet shrivel. But which are best? Well, here's my pick of the top sets from 2024 for AFOL collectors. We begin our journey in fair Paris, filled with fine wine, fine women, albeit with hairy armpits, people wearing onions, odd sausage salutes, and of course, Set 21061, released in June for £200 $230 US, and €230. Whilst the architecture theme has now given us multiple different sets from different places all around the world, this is undoubtedly one of the greatest, not just from 2024, because it's the only one that was released for the theme, but I'm talking ever. It's true that the building experience isn't fantastic, mostly due to so many pieces being in the same color. It's a little bit similar to what the build is like in the Colosseum, although not as bad. Nonetheless, when this is done, it simply is an absolute joy to look at. Whilst it is admittedly smaller than I would like, in some ways, I guess that's better because it does make it easier to display. It keeps the price at a place that isn't unreasonable, and it is filled with a simply staggering level of detail. It's just a beautiful looking set. I also think that it's one of the things that Lego has done which transcends just the simple theme that it is within. Of course, this would appeal to many architecture theme collectors, but because it's so good, not just because of the landmark that it's representing, but the attention to detail I have given it. Even if you have never bought something from this theme before, many people are going to look at this and want to have it on display in their own homes. And it is fantastic when Lego achieves that. Next up, we have the Phantom Menace. No, that's Phantom of the Opera. That's more like it. Now, although Brickheads may not be for everyone, 40676 has got to be one of the best the theme has ever given us. Released back in May for £50, $55, same in euros, the level of detail that they have given each of these characters is simply brilliant. Of course, currently in the sales for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, if you can get these, I strongly suggest doing so because they are retiring already at the end of the year. So a very short lifespan for what I truly think are brilliant Brickheads. The quality really does rise and fall a lot with Lego in this theme, and they are absolutely topping it out with these ones. So Star Wars fan, Brickheads fan, these are ones that you can be proud to display in your collection. Now, collectible minifigs usually have a mix of okay to really good figs, but these D&D ones that came out in September really were a breath of fresh air. Priced in at £3.50, €4 or $5, it really is very good value for money, albeit not quite as much for yourselves in the States, for really high quality level figures. I just love the details that these series always get. But the amount of new molds and just amazing character that comes out of each and every one of these, it's fantastic, and I don't really know what more people could ask for. My only problem with it is that when they can do incredible figs like this for what is a comparatively low price, when we get big sets, especially collector's editions, that then have pretty cheap figs in by comparison with very little printing, that's what then annoys me and makes me angry. But as far as these collectible minifigs go, absolutely brilliant, and Lego have set themselves a very high bar. The next theme is Batman and DC, and it has to be the Gotham City art set that I'm picking next on the list, set 76271. It came out in April, retailing for $300 US, same in euros, 260 British pounds. I think that the level of detail to this is simply phenomenal. There is so much jam-packed into it, and I really like the way that they've taken a bit of a risk. They've gone with an art set which potentially could put a lot of people off, and yet, frankly, I think it'll probably turn a lot of people on to that possibility. Those amongst you who have never bought a Lego art set in your life are going to look at this and just think how incredibly cool it is to have it hanging on the wall. Far more in-depth and detailed and textured than any poster could ever be. The minifigs were also decent, although not fantastic. I definitely had a bit of an issue with with the Harley Quinn one in particular, but it's nice to have them, and it really is all about the set itself. All the superb details that they put throughout it. It is true that it has a fairly high price tag, but in this particular instance, and I don't say this very often, I do think that it's worth it. Sticking with Batman, we now need to move to the classic version, made famous by Adam West. It's definitely not how I remember them looking. Set 76328 is the classic Batmobile. Released in October, it was £130, $150 US and €150. Now, it certainly wasn't without its flaws, things that I highlighted specifically in the review that I did on this set. There were several letdowns. The biggest for me is probably the simple lack of steering. However, if you are a collector of the cars that Lego bring out, or are a fan of the classic series, this does manage to incorporate it all in a pretty nostalgic and fairly affordable way. Should it have been better? Yes. Does that mean that you can't still buy it as an adult collector and enjoy it? Of course you can. You know, sadly, with Lego, quite often it is a case of having to weigh up whether the omissions or silly mistakes that they make are still worth the price that you have to pay. It can become a bit of a trade-off. Now, it is very sad that that is the case, but in this particular instance, I feel the trade-off is one that I at least am willing to make. Next up, the biggest argument that kids could ever give their parents for fruit not really being healthy. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs Cottage, thankfully based off of the original animated movie and not the live-action remake. Whilst there was definitely a bit of controversy at the time over the design of this set and the similarity of the one proposed on Lego Ideas, something that I covered back then, let's put that aside and just return to how great it was to finally get this set. There was quite a bit of time there where many people were afraid this wasn't going to see the light of day, and I'm so pleased that it did. Yes, once again, there are some stupid mistakes, simple things like not even having a staircase to get up to the top of the cottage in, but in it we finally got all of the dwarves in minifigure form, a somewhat flimsy in places but nonetheless brilliant looking set. If you loved the older Disney movies, and perhaps, you know, bearing in mind that this is based at AFOL's, you're not into the likes of all the princess line of Disney sets that are aimed far more juniorized that come out most of the time, and you're wanting something that harks back to your own childhood, fond memories, really building on that nostalgia, this is absolutely it. Personally, it's one of my favorites to have on display. My next choice brings us to Fortnite and set 77072. Now this one will be contentious. It's Peelybone, released in October for £90, $100, €100. It is a very peculiar set. In fact, it's one that when I first saw it, it really didn't appeal to me at all. It was only because of this channel and sort of the interest of what it would be like to build and do a review on that I actually bought it. I'm really pleased that I did. Whilst I also got the Battle Bus, and that may be something that's far more iconic for Fortnite fans, and certainly was great to go on the minifigs with, it just simply wasn't anywhere near as interesting a building experience as what we get here. This was something very different, totally out of the box from Lego. They've never done a sort of split in half buildable figure like this before. Now, because of the subject matter, it's kind of unlikely that they'd ever need to do it again, but certain things like this are transferable, and it would certainly be cool if there's certain characters, perhaps in future, that a similar kind of core concept would work with, then I would be very open to seeing it. But even if not, and this is just a total one-off, it's a one-off that you should own. It looks way better in person. The posability is fantastic. It really made me do a complete 180. I went into it kind of expecting to hate it when I was done, and actually, it really makes me smile every time that I now look at it. If you want to get back to the sheer enjoyment of building with Lego, well, here's where you can start. Let me know your thoughts on it down below if you have bought it and built it. I think it is one to change a lot of minds. The next one is for the Harry Potter collectors and set 76437 The Burrow, which came out in September for $260, £220 and €260. Now, for the AFOLs who like to collect Harry Potter, it does become a little bit of a headache. Naturally, this is a huge theme with such popularity and commercialism that's attached to it. Lego do bounce us all over the place. There's lots of remakes, things come in all different sizes, and it does turn into a really difficult time of it trying to pair an actual collection that you want to display together into something that makes any form of sense. Just look at all the Diagon Alley sets, all the different size shops and things that we've had. It's really very confusing and almost stupid in the way that they've done it. However, if we focus on it individually, this is something more along the size scale of Gringotts Bank if we're talking about putting it on display next to one another. Of course, as far as actual scaling goes, it's completely out the window. They're totally different. I even think that LEGO themselves have kind of given up on that when it comes to this theme. But this set brought us minifigs that we hadn't had before, along with some new versions of characters that we have, of course, had many times over. But it's also a fun build. I really like the way that it was designed, getting the tilt on it, all the different colors and pieces that they used. It was great. It's still not technically big enough. There aren't enough bedrooms for all the characters. And despite all the stickers in the set and different printed elements, there were still kind of obvious omissions and things that should have definitely been included in here. All that said and done, it's definitely the most mature AFOL-based set that LEGO have released for the theme this year. And if you are focusing on those larger sets, the ones with definitely a bit more presence and certainly maturity about them, then this does build on that well. Now, of course, the Icons theme has always been heavily aimed at AFOL collectors, and my first pick for 2024 is the Natural History Museum. Technically released in December of 2023, it's still a 2024 set. Priced at £260, $300, same in euros. This was a wonderfully refreshing addition to the modular theme. Of course, these sets are all about the display ability, and it does look fantastic when it's completed, but hidden away amongst its various layers are loads of wonderful little details. And if you have ever visited the Natural History Museum, then you will appreciate these even more. There's something oddly satisfying, I find, when you're doing a build, to be making things which give you a chuckle or a smile whilst you're putting them together, just to have them covered up. You know that unless you take all of it apart, you're never really going to see those parts again. And yet they're in there, and you know they're in there. And of course, if you do ever find the time to reopen it back up, there will also be the things that you've forgotten, which gives you a fresh enjoyment all over again. That is something that goes throughout the modular series and is at an absolute pinnacle here. This is jam-packed with it. Such a beautiful set. And with the Tudoresque inn that's coming out in January is the next modular, that one being a corner one, I think that they could go together really well. Definitely one of the strongest things that LEGO does, so fingers crossed they keep up the same level of wonderful detail going forwards. Now, shortly after the Natural History Museum, in February, came 10327, the Dune Ornithopter, for £150, $165, same in euros. And I mean, just look how cool this actually is. Again, something very different from what we've seen from LEGO in the past, and it's that was so exciting about it. I mean, I liked the film. I can't say that I was a massive fan of it or anything, but just this set, so different and innovative, and of course with pieces that we'd never seen before. It would be great to get more sets. I think it's unlikely. A lot of people have already said probably a one-off. But even if it's not directly from Dune, this is what I want to see. New, exciting designs, cool minifig lineups, sure, but the set itself incorporates something that's just really awesome to have on display, but also you can have fun with it as well. This is something that, yeah, you can play with. And it's a nice blend of some of the more traditional sets with a lot of Technic elements in there too. So it's a bit of a build challenge and you learn stuff while you're doing it. I do think their marketing pictures are funny. Like, this is the normal house that people are going to have. This is the normal display. But look, a lot of the adult sets are based around the display ability of them. And this definitely is that. But there certainly is a lot of fun to be had with this too. And it is one of those sets that when nobody else is looking, you do get down and start having a bit of fun with. Next for icons, of course, I've chosen the Medieval Town Square as one of the best ones of the year. This is set 10332. It released in March, retailing for $230, £200, €230. There are a lot of castle fans out there, myself included, so the medieval themed sets are always going to be popular and therefore highly scrutinized. Now, following on from the Lion Knight's castle that LEGO officially gave us, and of course, the smaller creator medieval castle and the ones from the Brickmeat Designer program, this was always going to be on a lot of people's shopping lists. Now, there are things about it which, particularly at the time when it came out, caused a lot of issues, things like how the roofs were constructed, not having enough animals in, and yeah, I agree, there are definitely things that should have been done different, but there's also a lot here that was really done right. And I'm just really pleased that LEGO are actually revisiting those nostalgic old themes that so many of us AFOLs remember and love, and this does encapsulate that. It incorporates well with the existing sets. For any castle theme fans out there, it frankly is just a must-have, but even for those who are maybe just looking to get into it, it's still a set that you can really enjoy. Of course, like so many, it's not cheap, but then 2024 has been a year filled with big sets and big prices. Which segues me into Middle Earth, because one of the biggest and most expensive sets of the year is, of course, Lord of the Rings Barad-dûr. Released back in June, this was $460, €460 and 400 British pounds. After the brilliance of Rivendell, it did have a lot to live up to, and I've got to admit, it did fall slightly short, certainly of Rivendell standards. There were a bunch of things that didn't fully make sense of it, which I highlighted in the review I did at the time, but there was also so much brilliance to this set. The interior, which we never actually see, had to have a lot of artistic licensing, and whilst it wasn't to everyone's taste, I felt it was done pretty well. And as far as the exterior goes, sure, it should have been taller, but it's a very imposing set. Some of the minifigs were a bit of a letdown as far as their outfits are concerned, and those are the sorts of misses on sets like this which are pretty unforgivable from LEGO, and they do frankly need to do better. But where our different orcs are concerned, the Mouth of Sauron, and the Dark Lord himself, apart from the fact that he should have really been a tall fig, those were excellent. Now, this is something that is massive, not so much in terms of width, as is typical with LEGO sets, but vertically. This, the Avengers Tower, they really are pushing it, and so that does make it kind of difficult potentially to find a place to position in your home. But then with a big price tag, you do expect large sets, and there's certainly loads going on in this. If you are a Tolkien fan, this is an absolute must, a real collector's piece. I am so pleased that they have returned to Lord of the Rings, and long may they continue it, but it would be cool if they did also do smaller sets as well, and battle packs would be amazing. But coming back to this, it's flawed, it's massive, it's expensive, and it's also brilliant. But for something far scarier than the Scourge of Sauron, it's Santa's post office, or more precisely, the reminder of the money that's going to have to be spent on presents. Set 10339 is the latest for the Winter Village set collectors, released in October for £90, $100, same in euros. I find these sets to be quite dangerous. They're a little bit like the modulars. Once you start getting into collecting them, you kind of need them all. It is very much like Pokemon in that regard. You know, I know some people with really big, I mean massive, traditional winter display setups, and I'm like, yeah, but it's just not Lego. Something about these bricks makes it all the more impressive. Now, I have to say, I don't think that this is by any means the strongest that they have given us in the lineup. In fact, the just retired Holiday Main Street is one that I much prefer, but then that is a personal opinion. This still has a lot going for it. It's fun, it's quirky, it's great for kids as well as adults. And that is something that I think is quite special, because although this is an 18 plus AFOL set, you know, it is just colourful and fun and kind of juniorized in a way. It is something that, regardless of what age you are, you can really get into and enjoy. There's not actually that many sets that do that. This really is one that is for the whole family. That sort of inclusivity, wide appeal that brings everyone together is something that LEGO sometimes really hits the nail on the head for. So, a simple set perhaps, but also wonderful, and I think very deserving of being on this list. Now, my last choice for the Icons theme is this 10335, the Endurance, which has of course only just come out on Black Friday. Priced in at $270 in the US, same in euros and 230 British pounds. Now, it has been a very long time since we had a ship, and frankly, nothing that has been like this. You know, after it was partially leaked, people were worried about what size it was going to be. A lot wanted it to be in minifigure scale, but the thing is, first of all, that was never going to happen with the price. But this isn't a made-up ship. It's based upon really serious events minifigures wouldn't really be suitable for. You know, I love the Titanic. It means an awful lot to me. In fact, it's probably my favorite set of all, and I wouldn't put this up there to that standard, but it's along the same lines. It is a serious subject matter, and it deserves to have this level of attention to detail. Minifigs would have been wrong with this. At least that certainly is my opinion. Now, of course, if you have bought it on Black Friday, you should well get the GWP of Shackleton's lifeboat, and then you will have minifig. But as far as the actual set itself goes, what a beautiful display piece this is. It would fit in very easily with, you know, proper model ships that aren't made of Lego. You wouldn't be embarrassed to put this side by side, have it prominently on display in your home, you know, next to your shepherd's crook / Gandalf staff that's going on there, which of course we all have just inside the door. But from a collector's point of view, I'm very pleased that they have done this. Yes, it's great to get some fantasy sets, and, you know, I'm a massive pirate theme fan. It probably is my favorite theme, even just edging out Castle. So, of course, I want more pirate ships, but that's not what this is. It's never what it should have been. I think they've done a superb job with this. It's a great homage, and it's one of those few sets which, even if you are not usually into Lego, for those people who've never bought a Lego set before in their life, they could look at this and easily buy it, not just because of what the ship is, that it's the endurance, what it represents, but simply just the sheer building experience and beauty of it as a set. There aren't that many that you can say that about. So for me, gotta be one of the top sets of the year. Now, our journey takes us next to a new quest, this time in Dungeons & Dragons Thought the Red Dragon's Tale, now in the Ideas theme. This one was released back in April, retailing for £315 and $360 and euros respectively. It is, of course, a brilliant one for those who are fans of D&D, but also if you are just into fantasy builds. This is pretty awesome. There were changes that I didn't like, the most obvious being the dragon itself, which was completely different from what was proposed in the original Ideas submission. But one of the cool things about this set is the fact that you can actually play with it in a different way to pretty much any other that we've had. You can have a game of D&D with this. What was irritating is that, be it for insiders points or buying it, you would have to get things separately. That, you know, just doesn't sit well with me. It really should be incorporated into this, especially at the big price tag that this is. That aside, bunch of cool minifigs, really wacky, out there, different to what we've had before. It is a really fun playset, and it was great that they took us into the world of Dungeons and Dragons, not only with this, but with the collectible minifigure series that we touched on earlier. My biggest problem is that I would like this to be a lot bigger. In fact, it would be great if they did loads of sets around this, because then you could have a proper D&D game that's going to go on for hours and hours. The big problem with that is the overall cost, because this one really is up there price-wise. It's more expensive, I think, than it should have been, and is the only real marker that goes against it. Nonetheless, still a great set for AFOLs, providing, of course, that you do like the source material. My next pick is also an Ideas set based upon one of the most famous movies in history, outdone only by its own film score and a couple of chords to strike terror into the hearts of everyone. 21350 is, of course, Jaws. It was released in August, retailing for £130 and $150 and euros. Now, some people gave this a hard time. I was not one of them. In my review, I went through this in detail, all the brilliant things about it. It's true that there were a couple of stupid choices, such as the back of the shark's fin being the wrong way around, but the minifigs were brilliant, capturing the characters wonderfully. The shark, old Bruce here, probably the weakest part of it, if we're honest. The face is a little bit too cheerful, but get it at the right angle and it does look suitably scary. It's just the silly choice with the tail fin that was dumb. However, that is an easy fix, and of course when you have it in the diorama setup with the boat, then it really looks the part, and it is the boat itself which is just so brilliantly crafted. It really has done the Orca proud. All the little details, the choice of colours, it could have done with slightly more room on the inside of the cabin for our minifigs, but it is a case of starting to nitpick. Overall, this is a fantastic set, which if you are at all a fan of the movie, you should absolutely get. But also, whether it's just films in general or you are a collector of particular standout Lego sets, this is one that you should add. And whilst you may need a bigger boat, you shouldn't need a bigger display shelf because this is all fairly compact, doesn't take up too much room, and I feel comes in at a reasonable price point too. Time now though to move from sea to space and a bit further into the galaxy with 76286, the Milano spaceship, the latest iteration of it, released in August for $180, £160 and €180. My biggest problem with this is that it does look quite a bit cooler than its predecessor, which means that I have to have both, and now this one kind of shows the other up. Nonetheless, it's a really good set, and yes, for those of you who will no doubt say this is a 12 plus set, it's not for AFOLs. True, it's not just for them, it's for a lot of ages. But there are certain sets within the Marvel lineup which have always been more aimed at collectors, and certainly if, like me, you have the other ships, you kind of have to have this too. It's also important for correcting certain minifigs which were wrong first time round. At the end of the day, these movies have such a wide appeal that regardless of what age you are, you can buy this and very happily have it on display. And if you take it off the stand, it's pretty swooshable as well, so whether you're brazen enough to play with it in front of others or just want to do it when no one else is looking, it's good for that too. If that doesn't do it for you though, we can head to a different galaxy altogether much further away, of course to Star Wars and the Starship Collection, being the Millennium Falcon, Tantive 4 and Invisible Hand. Now, whilst it can be argued that one is better than all the others, and I'm sure that people will have their favourites, here's the thing. Firstly, the price is refreshing. These are all 18 plus sets aimed at collectors. The Falcon was $85, €75, £75. The Tantive, £70, $80, €80. And the Invisible Hound, a little bit more oddly, £47, $50 and €53. But all in all, that is much lower than what we've seen previously for sets that are aimed at collectors. I'm not saying that it's particularly cheap for the sets individually, it's about right. In fact, it could even be argued as normal that it should have been fractionally cheaper, but actually I feel they're pretty good value for money. The point is, here is a much lower barrier to entry, something that is accessible to far more fans, and also great from a space point of view as well, the space within your homes. Sure, big sets are fantastic, but they take up a lot of room. Having the ability to display these cool sets in such a small form, whilst still being really detailed, again, that makes them a lot more attractive. So I'm very glad that they've done the Starship Collection. It's super that they are continuing it with the Acclamator and the Home One next. Not only do these appeal to existing Star Wars collectors, but it opens it up the possibility of collecting to a whole lot more people. And that is a great win. Now, this isn't really an official pick, but I do just need to give a shout out to set 75379, the latest version of R2-D2, because although this is a 10 plus set and certainly not a collector's edition, quite frankly, it's better than the actual R2-D2 collector's edition that we already had and was priced in at a lot more. You know, this was a decent set, but here was something that's pretty much just as detailed, just on a much smaller and more manageable basis. The thing is, I think it's fair to say that this is definitely going to be the more in-depth detail, overall better version, but is it worth that huge price difference? No. In my opinion, absolutely not. You get far more for your money with this. Now, it was £90 British, $100, €100, released back in March. So unless you are an absolute avid collector who has to have all of the official collector's edition sets, in which case you would have to go for this, then quite frankly, I'd say this is going to suit you better and at least save you a little bit of money which can go towards some of the other hugely expensive sets released this year. Now, my penultimate choice for Star Wars sets is Jedi Bob's Starfighter, and again, it's an 8 plus set. How could I possibly include it? Well, released in August for £35, $40, €40, set 75388 is something that Star Wars fans have simply been waiting ages for. Jedi Bob should have been acknowledged way before this. It's a shame that it took the Rebuild the Galaxy series to make it come about, but what is great is that LEGO actually finally listened to fans and delivered on something. And actually, for the price, it's not half bad. It's a pretty good ship. But ultimately, if you are a Star Wars collector, then you will simply appreciate the significance of this set and probably be very pleased that for once you can have something so easily accessible from a price point of view. Now, of course, that means that last for Star Wars, it has to be Jabba's sail barge, set 75397, priced in at a whopping $500, €500, £430. Now, true, this is a big set, but it really didn't warrant that price tag. These UCS sets, they're deliberately aimed at AFOL collectors who are so passionate about Star Wars, who also have a real enjoyment of LEGO and want those things to come together and to have a really impressive set that is just going to be perfect, or as near as perfect as you could possibly ask. And it's such a shame that LEGO consistently seems to almost punish those Star Wars fans. First of all, with extremely high prices for very small minifigure counts, and also builds which aren't always what they should be. Don't get me wrong, the sail barge itself I find to be absolutely fine. It's got a good amount of detailing in it, lots of enjoyment to be had. The thing is, this whole scene also needs the Sarlacc pit, which was done as a separate set, one that you cannot put next to this. They don't look like they're designed to go together. The Sarlacc pit seems far more juniorized than this sail barge does, and yet they've used it as a way to split out the minifigs. They've got minifigures wrong in the Sarlacc pit. It's just all messy and mistakes that shouldn't be made. All that said, though, it's definitely a collector's piece. It deserves to be on here, but LEGO fans also deserve for it not to have such a ridiculous price. Sadly, that doesn't seem like something that's likely to change anytime soon. My next pick is 77092, and at last, the collaboration between LEGO and Nintendo brought us something other than Super Mario with The Legend of Zelda and the Great Deku Tree. This, the 2-in-1, released in September for £260, $300, €300. For me, the Ocarina of Time will always be one of the best video games that's ever been made. And whilst the subsequent games aren't ones that I've really played very much, don't have anywhere near the amount of nostalgia, I've still enough experience to know that they are very good. And so the idea of a 2-in-1 certainly isn't bad. We would finally get some really great minifigs, the ability to build two versions of one of the most iconic beings and places from the game series. It's a very pretty and nicely thought out set that is done with adults in mind, and something that can look great on display in your home and certainly not be thought of as just a kid's toy by unknowing friends who happen to come round. It does really well and ticks pretty much all the boxes. The biggest issue is that price tag. Whilst it's a 2-in-1, you can only display one version at a time. It seems very unnecessary that they put it in this high, even by the collaboration standards of Nintendo and LEGO. It's big and it'll put a lot of people off. And that's a big shame, because apart from that, it is definitely a cool collector set and one that many AFOLs would like to get their hands on. Moving over to Technic, my next pick is 42177, the Mercedes-Benz G500 Professional line. This was released back in August for £220, $250, €250. These more rugged vehicle builds really do appeal to me. And of course, the Technic theme has always been the one that proposes the most challenge to builders, something that can be fiddly, tricky, even irritating, and yet so satisfying whilst you're putting it together. And unless you are an absolute expert, something that you can learn from whilst you're building. I know I do, and I really value that. In fact, to be frank, it's often that build experience that I appreciate far more in the Technic models than the final thing itself. Sure, it looks cool, but for me, going through how it all works and goes together, that is the real joy of these sets. So, if you're an adult fan of Lego who likes a challenge, who wants to stretch yourself, learn new things just for the pleasure of doing so, or maybe because you want to do your own mocks and therefore need to brush up on your skills and learn new ones, this is a theme that is dependable to turn to, and this is definitely one of the best sets from that theme this year. The other, in my opinion, is 42182, the NASA Apollo LRV, also released in August, this time for £190, $220, €220. It may be a lesser price, but it's not really a lesser challenge when it comes to putting together. Filled with a lot of small Technic elements as well, makes this one particularly fiddly, but there's also parts that we have never had before and ways of displaying it which are really refreshing. They've done a fantastic job with this one, and it's exactly the sort of subject matter and set that's going to appeal to not only normal collectors, those of us who just like good Lego sets, but also those again who perhaps might shy away from Lego normally, might not appreciate some of the finer things that can be done with it, and yet here that is all too apparent. It's another set, it's another build that you can proudly have on your shelf, your desk, your coffee table, and maybe it'll make you smile if, when you were a kid, you used to dream of being an astronaut because you thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Well, you can laugh at your younger self, because you know there's nothing cooler or sexier than being an adult who enjoys playing with plastic bricks. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out one of these two next, and I'll catch you on the next one.